Hi, Mike Brantley, auctioneer. With you today, I want to discuss probably the most asked question I get from auctioneers, and I get questions from auctioneers all the time. It'll go something like this. Late bid came in. Should I reopen it? Ringman had another bid. When I said sold, he thought he was on. Another bidder came up later and said, hey, you didn't see my bid. You know, misbids, tie bids, disputed bids, all that stuff. A lot of discussion in auctioneer groups, conventions, seminars, conventions, hallways, restaurants, bars, you name it. I'll sit down, somebody sits right next to me and says, hey, Mike, got a question for you. And besides a few other topics of concern, that's often one I get asked a lot. And I want to discuss today reopening a bid at all. James Peck is an attorney. He was a federal bankruptcy judge. He now works in private practice as an attorney. And he talked about what he called, and he termed it, upset bids, and his thoughts on what I have told auctioneers over time, the short term versus the long term, or seeing the forest for the trees and that kind of thing. And I want to read you part of what he said about these upset bids. Got it right here. Accepting a late bid may mean more money for sellers in the short run, but by upsetting the expectations of those who thought the bidding was at an end, it may, in the long term, undermine confidence in sales and discourage prospective purchasers from making their best offers in a timely manner. Ironically, the integrity of the process and respect for bidders' reasonable expectations is generally consistent with the goal of asset maximization, as most courts have found that the risk of an upset bid stifles aggressive bidding and ultimately results in lost value to the estate. I couldn't agree more. I went to an auction about 200 miles from here. I wasn't identified as me. I didn't tell anyone who I was other than registering using my driver's license to get a bid number, that type of thing. And the person registering me didn't know me. And I watched this auctioneer somewhat capriciously, somewhat arbitrarily reopen the bid when he said sold, and the ringman said, hey, wait a minute, I got a bid over here. I thought you had me. Okay, I'm going to reopen the bid. 10 minutes later, sold. Oh, wait a minute. I thought I was on. He's, well, I'm sorry. I said sold and moved on. I mean, you talk about the worst kind of reopening the bid. Arbitrary. No particular rules to it. Sometimes I reopen it. Sometimes I don't reopen it. Now, you could have a policy, I suppose, of always reopening it. And what do you think would happen? Let's just say you are an auctioneer and you do a good number of auctions around the United States, and people get to know your policies and procedures and way of conducting business. And hell, for that matter, you could put right in the terms and conditions. If a late bid comes in, disputed bid, tie bid, I'm going to reopen it. Well, when are people going to bid? Well, if you're going to reopen it, if I bid right at the end or right as you're saying sold, when are astute, tenured, experienced bidders going to bid? They're going to bid right at the end. You know, bidders aren't stupid. If you're an auctioneer that's reopening the bid routinely or announcing to your crowd that we're going to reopen the bid today, if there's a dispute or a tie or a missed bid, people are going to bid in that fashion. And besides what should have been your 3-hour auction taking 5.5 hours, Um, well, I'll tell you what happened at this auction. After the auctioneer reopened it, didn't reopened it, didn't reopen it, I had a bidder walk right by me in kind of a disgusted look on her face. And she said, I don't know what the hell this auctioneer's doing, but I ain't sticking around. There's some stuff I want, but I don't know what he's doing. He pointed to me and said sold, and then he reopened the bid and sold to somebody else. In fact, in her case, didn't even look back at her for a further bid. Now I'm going to reopen it. You want a bid more? Okay, sold. Kind of like that. I turned to her and I said, what happened? That's how I understood what happened, because I didn't actually see it. And I said, are you a regular auction goer? She said, I go to auctions in 7 states. I buy for a company that refurbishes manufacturing equipment. She said, but I'll tell you this, I'll never come to one of his auctions again. Short-term gains, long-term disenfranchising bidders, driving bidders away, people not feeling good about the process, the integrity of the bidding process. I still remember early in my career, very early, I went to an auction only from where I live now, Columbus, Ohio, maybe 50 miles, 75 miles, kind of southwest. Auctioneer stood up. He said, welcome to our auction today. I'm so-and-so, I'm the auctioneer. And when I say sold, it's over. Everybody got that? Everybody clear? So get your hands up. Boy, did they get their hands up. Waving, yelling, asking the ringman, hey, do you have me? Because if not, I want to make sure I'm on. People endeavored, behaved in a fashion that they wanted to get their bids in, and bids are offers. They're delivered to the auctioneer. We're just suggesting people, I say, start me out at 500. I'm not bidding 500. I'm not saying you have to bid 500. I'm suggesting you bid 500, that you make the offer. I'm inviting offers as the auctioneer. You're making the offer. Well, boy, those folks at that auction where he routinely made those types of announcements, they really got their bid cards up. I've largely taken that practice. We've run an auction house on a weekly basis for a little over 20 years. I'll even have another bidder in our crowd, go over and say, Mike doesn't reopen it. You might as well move on. Remember his announcements when he said sold, it's over? Yeah, you can disenfranchise a bidder who gets their bid missed, their offer wasn't accepted. Or you can disenfranchise somebody who has equity because they were the high bidder when you said sold. I've talked about the likelihood of a missed bidder pursuing damages against you versus a bidder you said sold to and pursuing damages to you. And the courts around the United States are largely, almost entirely, on this issue. The bidder that the auctioneer said sold to and then reopened the bid, that bidder pursuing damages. Well, we don't. You almost could argue that there's no standing for the bidder that didn't deliver their bid timely or didn't ensure that their bid had been or was going to be accepted. So what do I tell auctioneers in that bar, the restaurant, in the hallway, during class, after class, on the phone, text message? I tell them, hey, say sold and move on. And make that announcement at the start of your auction. When I say sold, it's over. So get your hands up. We're not going to be reopening bids today. When I say sold, I've got a contract. Lastly, I'll say this. Steve Profit, auctioneer and attorney, well known in the auction community, even held that he wasn't sure that the auctioneer had any ability to reopen the bid, as the auctioneer was forming a contract between his client, the seller, owner, and the buyer. and the auctioneer is not a party to that contract to reopen it. The buyer and seller are in contract, that the auctioneer puts the seller, his client, and the buyer in the contract. That's a contract form, and wondered if the auctioneer would have any right to reopen the bid given that contract construction. I don't think you need to go that deep. That's fine, and I love Steve, and we had many conversations. But what's my advice? Just leave it there. Leave it there. Say sold and move on. And James Pack says, the risk of an upset bid stifles aggressive bidding and ultimately results in a lost value to the estate, to yourself. You might be getting the irony of reopening the bid here or there to get a little bit more money for your seller might, in the big picture, be getting your seller less money and less bidders at your next auction. Your next seller even injured. Leave it there. Mike Brantley, Auctioneer. Thanks for checking in. We'll have more videos coming up. Have a great day and stay safe.